I'm Jo Baring. I'm the director of the Ingram Collection of Modern British and Contemporary Art, and I'm here in central London in Soho Square at BWG Gallery with artist James Dearlove in anticipation of his solo show here at the gallery, which opens on the 19th of October, closing on the 15th of November. James, it's such a pleasure to be here with you with some of the works that are going to be in the exhibition. We know each other because of your involvement in the Ingram Prize. So back in 2020, you were awarded the Ingram Prize for that painting, Figures on a Bed, which is now part of the Ingram Collection, one of the leading collections of art in the UK. So we're surrounded by some of the paintings that are going to be included in your solo show. Can you start off by telling us how you came to painting? Have you always been a painter?
Well, I trained at art school. I went to the Slade and studied theatre design, and ended up assisting one of my tutors. She was a woman called Yolanda Sonnabend, who designed The Tempest for Derek Jarman, and used to design ballets for Lindsay Kemp and the Royal Ballet. So I assisted her for a few years. And while I was assisting her, I was beginning to assist other film directors on set designs. And then I kind of just got distracted, as it were, by film and television. And I ended up working in television as a producer. So it's over a period of years. It just, the money was really good, and it was exciting, and so I ended up working in television for about 12 years as a talent producer. I worked at MTV. I worked on shows like Big Brother and all sorts of kind of crazy reality TV. But while I was working in television, I began to have this nagging sense of wanting to paint, and so I would paint in my spare time, and just over time, the painting just became a really important part of my life, and so eventually I made the decision to leave television and just, dedicate myself to painting. I mean, I had to plan to do it, and so yeah, I kind of went a really roundabout route. I kind of started off at the Slade, went off television for 12 to 15 years, and then came back to painting. I mean, it's only now that I realise that, some of what I experienced as a TV producer actually comes out in the paintings. Yeah.
I suppose it's that interest in humanity, isn't it? About human life and personality, psychology comes out that you have been observing in TV.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and pop culture as well. Working at MTV, I was very aware of pop culture, and I mean, the title of the show, Tales of the Sea, is a loose adaptation of PJ Harvey's Stories from the City, Stories from the Sea, which is one of my favourite rock albums. There's definitely a synergy between the two worlds. And you're right, the psychology of Big Brother, the fact that you're sticking loads of characters, if you like, in a set. And I mean, a lot of my paintings have figures in a room, figures on a bed, I should say, is in a theatrical kind of proscenium stage, if you like. And I think that, when I was working on Big Brother, you're very aware of the fact that you've got a set with figures interacting in it. I know it sort of sounds
it sounds completely
obvious,
fascinating,
but, yeah.
Because now when I'm looking at your work and thinking about that history of set design, and then also the way that you would have worked with people and in TV production, that angle as well, definitely you can see that being drawn out in the paintings. As you say, the viewer angle that we've got into the paintings, and also just the way that they're set up. That kind of idea of something being staged for us as the viewer that we've seen. How much of your work has that staged element to it?
Yeah, I mean, you've articulated it way better than I, because that's exactly right. I mean, I'm very aware of that staged element. This painting, again, you've got, the square table kind of mirrors the bed. and the figures that are around the table, there's figures on the bed, and then you've got the room. So, you know, and then even with my sea paintings, you've still got a sense of the square and, you know, the proscenium arch, if you like, in the horizon, and they're definitely staged, and I think about that very much when I'm making the painting.
That's absolutely fascinating. It's really actually helps just to imagine that viewer point of view when we're looking at for a way into the painting.
Yeah.
You talked about the title, Tales of the City, Tales of the Sea. It refers to your favourite rock album, but also it can reference your life as well and where you live. You talked about your time as a TV producer when you were very much based in bustling Soho, where we are now. Now you've taken yourself away from that, haven't you? Can you tell us about where your studio is and also where you spent the summer? Because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right, because the title does refer to my move from London, recent move from London, and painting in my studio in Vauxhall, and I worked. I had an office very near here when I was a TV producer, and my studio was in Vauxhall, so right at the centre of kind of a busy big city. And painting, so you know, the beginnings of the city paintings, I call them, were beginning to come even then. And then I made this move to Cornwall, and so that's the title of the show kind of references that move. And now I have a studio literally in the middle of nowhere in Cornwall.
Sounds heaven. It's fascinating that you've chosen to move your studio there to the edge of Bodmin Moor, to nowhere, as you call it, and yet your paintings are really densely populated with people.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
You know, there are practical reasons to move, but also I was drawn to Cornwall. My family comes from Cornwall. It became financially made much more sense for me to move out of my very expensive studio in Vauxhall and effectively have no studio rent in Cornwall, because I set up the garage in my cottage, became my studio. But it was when I made the move to Cornwall that I really began, the nostalgia for the city really became important part of making the paintings, and I was able to kind of to actually make the paintings I wanted to make when I was in the city, but I couldn't, if that makes sense. Because
it does make sense.
I had a nostalgia for it all and a memory of it, and actually the distance that was put in place and removing myself enabled me to then make these paintings.
Because you can then process it, and as you say, there's the nostalgia, the memories, it's all colliding together on the canvas.
Absolutely.
They're figures, they're figurative paintings, and in the 21st century, it's really fascinating that we're still drawn to images of the human figure.
Yeah.
What is it about the human figure that's so appealing to you?
I don't know what it is. I suppose it's that's why I paint, is because I love painting the figure. And I mean, it's an endless exploration. And I just find that, you know, without a figure sort of electrifies for me a room, or these stages. I suppose because the paintings, the backgrounds are stages, I kind of have to populate them with figures, and then I suppose it's what the figures kind of do to the rooms or the scenarios that I've put them in. I just find really fascinating.
So they activate that space, but.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting, so you talk about it being a stage set and it being a play, and then you're putting them in scenarios. Do you have a scenario in your mind as to what's going on when you're painting it, or it's for us to try and invoke some narrative?
Yeah, it's definitely for the viewer to evoke a narrative. And I have an inherent, I mean, I love narrative painting, and I don't mind there being a narrative at all, but I definitely wouldn't want to put a narrative onto the viewer. And I'm very conscious of that too. I mean, this painting obviously, well, there are so many different interpretations, I hope,
Absolutely. And it's the ambiguity of it is what's so enticing, isn't it? Because if you think, if we look about even just these two figures here on the right-hand side of the canvas, they're completely incongruous.
Yes.
So you've got the suited man having his coffee on his laptop, and then there's the man there looking out the window, his jeans unbuttoned enticingly. Those two wouldn't normally be together in that scenario.
No. And actually, I wanted the flowers to almost cut each scene. So really it could be 4 people at different times in the room even. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be that, but yes, I wanted them to all be very separate, but somehow together at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense.
I mean, it's really, it makes a lot of sense actually, and just to think about that idea of using the still life, using the flowers as a device to separate the figures is a really good way in. And as you say, they could be using that room at different times of the day. There's someone having their cornflakes. He looks like he's bathed in evening light then.
Yes.
So it is actually those different time spaces, the narrative. And then of course here, in the window, we've got these very urban flat blocks of flats, but combined with the trees, but the trees have lost all their leaves.
Yeah. Yes, and the trees are pollarded as well. I mean, I was looking at some photographs I'd taken of London. I mean, I paint a lot from photographs I take, and I just noticed that the plane trees were all really severely pollarded. I don't know, and that just felt poignant somehow.
It does have a poignancy, doesn't it? Let's talk about this painting, Figures on a Bed. So this won the Ingram Prize for you a few years ago. It's now in the Ingram Collection.
Thank you, Jo.
Pleasure. No, well, it's just an incredible painting, and it's so wonderful to see it again here.
Yeah. It's amazing to see it again, actually.
We can go back to what you talked about before, about your interest in pop culture.
Yeah.
Because if you look closely, if the viewer looks closely, they can see that the surface of the painting is actually newspaper.
Yeah.
Why did you use that device to paint onto?
Well, it goes right back to when I was at art school. We were taught to paint, taught oil painting by my painting tutor on newspaper. So just purely for economic reasons. So we would get a square of newspaper, brush it with linseed oil, and then paint usually a still life that was made for us, who would all sit around it and paint it. And so I was kind of aware of painting on newspaper. I paint on newspaper a lot. And so there's that. And then I suppose I find that sometimes I find painting on a blank surface is really intimidating. So again, just on a very basic practical level, the print that's on the paper kind of just makes it less daunting and makes it more freeing to make marks, because you're sort of making marks on top of marks that are already there. But with this piece, it was very much, I had been experimenting with painting on newspaper, and I really wanted to sort of push painting the figure somehow, and I was trying to find ways to fragment the figure and to kind of get away from just to shatter the image. And I found that the newspaper really did that for me. And I find that after a while, if there's sort of enough in the composition, the painting kind of floats on top of so you get this kind of undercurrent, an interference somehow.
It almost makes the image more ephemeral, doesn't it? I think, when you're looking at it, and some of for example, the thigh there on the lower right-hand corner is almost not there. The flesh isn't there. The flesh tones are actually newspaper.
Yes.
And as you say, so that shatters the figure. But for me, it makes it something ephemeral about these kind of encounters, and something more temporary. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the sort of counterplay between the kind of cold, if you like, mechanical printed matter, if you like, and then the soft flesh on top of that. And then the more, slightly more obviously, but still I think it's pertinent, is the, the 24-hour news cycle that we're all bombarded with. To have these characters searching for intimacy painted on top of that kind of anxiety-inducing printed matter. I don't know.
It is anxiety-inducing, and it is noisy, isn't it? That 24-hour cycle. Yeah. There's noise. It's the outside world coming in, and this is someone's internal world or private world. Here, as you say, having this encounter with all that going on, it alludes to, I suppose, the freneticness of city life.
Yes, and I'd say that really alludes to a central theme in all of the paintings in the show, which is. I call it sort of desire and disquietude. It's those are two kind of themes that run through a lot of the paintings. And the newspaper really helps me kind of create that.
And I suppose that's technically, but also through the allusions, through the meaning that we make from seeing the newspaper.
Yes, and the interference of the printed matter, because it's really interesting. If you stand sort of back from the painting, you're not distracted by what. It's difficult painting newspaper because you don't want the viewer to be distracted by a headline or.
Yes, because I can't make out what's happening.
No, so quite consciously I've sort of got rid of anything that might draw the eye too much, but I also want the interference to be there. So
also that makes it quite unsettling, doesn't it? Because we always try and understand things. The brain is searching for words that it knows. Now, I'm really reminded of Francis Bacon when I look at something like that. But then in the work in general that's in this show, there are also real hints and undertones of people like John Craxton, about Keith Vaughan, particularly looking at this absolutely beautiful painting that's here behind me. I'm thinking about Craxton and Vaughan, Craxton in Crete in the 50s and 40s. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the influence of modernism, of those modern British artists on the work?
Yeah, so obviously they were a huge influence for me. And, when I was growing up and, wanting to be an artist, even though I got distracted by television for a while, the only, I remember the only books in the house where I was even aware of sort of homosexual men, was the David Hockney book, and then another art book that had some Bacons in, and so that there were real sort of groundbreaking sort of forerunners for sort of queer painting, if you like, and so it became real heroes of mine. So Bacon. If you're a queer painter in Britain, you just can't get away from these extraordinary painters, Craxton, Vaughan, Bacon, Hockney.
Who are all working with the figure.
All working with a figure.
With a male figure.
All struggling to find a place in the world where they could, because they were queer or homosexual, whatever they wanted to call themselves, and so I was just very aware of them, and so that's why I think their influence has crept into my work. Yeah, and I mean Craxton is a more recent sort of discovery, if you like. I'm not aware of him, but it's only recently I've really become fascinated with his work.
And he, of course, spent a lot of time in Crete.
Yes.
You spend a lot of time in Greece, and the sunlight there is just bounces off the canvas. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. So another artist was looking at one of my paintings and said, "Oh, you must look at Craxton's painting, Two Figures with Setting Sun," which is an extraordinary painting of a fisherman killing an octopus. You can't really. It's not about him killing an octopus. It's just in the corner. You have to really look to see the octopus, and then there's a sponge diver kind of lying, kind of recovering on the ground, and it's really about the setting sun and the light. So you're absolutely right, and it was when I saw that painting that I kind of thought, oh yes, well, this really resonates with me. The light on the figures and the way Craxton was, again, in his own way, it was cubist abstractions of the body, and so I just found it really fascinating. And it really resonated with me. And yes, and I've just been in Greece. Me and my husband were there for 2 months on the Mani Peninsula, living in we have a little caravan in an olive grove there that we rent off a farmer. And my husband was volunteering in a dog sanctuary and I was painting for 2 months. And again, it's difficult to be painting in Greece and not be aware of Craxton. You sort of have to, but he was definitely lurking over my shoulder, as I paint. I'm so aware of all his amazing paintings.
And so when you were in Greece this summer, did you paint some of the paintings that are going to be on show in this exhibition?
Yes, very much so, yeah. And in fact, there's a painting that references, it's called Three Figures with Setting Sun after Craxton. And it references that painting, and it's a reimagining, if you like, of that painting, where the octopus becomes much more important than it is in the original painting. But the sunlight and the colours and the romanticism, if you like, very, very present.
The exhibition is Tales of the City, Tales of the Sea. What do you think it is about the sea that you are particularly drawn to? I think one of the things that's quite a difficult question. I think so. Where the sea came in. So initially, when I moved down to Cornwall, I mentioned that I was really drawn to painting the city through nostalgia, and wasn't painting Cornwall at all, or the sea, or anything to do. And people would come into my studio and go, "That's all great, but aren't you influenced by Bodmin or the sea?" And I wasn't until another painter friend, and that's why it's so great to have input from other friends. Sort of said, "Oh, figures on a bed reminds me of Raft of the Medusa by Jericho." And I was like, "Oh wow, yeah, okay." Well, I sort of see what you mean, and suddenly I kind of thought, yeah, they are like, the figures on a bed are a bit like figures on rafts. And that was really my way in to bringing the sea into the paintings. Because you're still keeping the figure, and there's still that element of staging the
exactly,
set.
Yes.
So how do you do that with something so wild and untamable as the sea?
Yeah.
And I can see how you've done that. And then the elements of nature, the birds are really interesting there.
Yes. So the birds figure a lot in this show. There are lots of birds, and for me, in that painting, they're sort of pinning down the moment somehow for me. And the birds in the show are definitely violent birds. There's a triptych that is going to be in the show called Soda Lake Landscape with Figures and Birds. And that's got some marabou storks sort of destroying flamingos in it. So, yeah.
So that's interesting, isn't it? That element of violence and predatoriness and tension which comes into the scene.
Yeah. I think for me, the animals, the birds, help me introduce that tension. Yeah. Birds are so complicated and they carry so much meaning.
They're vehicles for so many things, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they look, can either be particularly aggressive, and here with those beaks and the blackness coming down.
Yeah. Most of my birds are pretty violent birds, yeah.
So when people come to this exhibition, what do you hope that they leave feeling?
There's a quote, Kafka said about a good book that he wanted that it should like an axe shatter the frozen sea within us. And I know it's kind of lofty ambition, but that is what I would love a painting or my paintings to do, or for the viewer to feel somehow that even there's a little crack, you know, that sort of frozen sea that modern life kind of puts in all of us, that we have to survive, we need to freeze up, don't we? To cut out all the...
Absolutely.
And I suppose with painting, that's what I find so fascinating about painting, if it can sort of soften for a moment that inner rigidity that we all have to have, then I feel like my job's done.
James, can you walk us through the exhibition?
Yes, well, I mean, this is such an amazing space here at 13 Soho Square. And really, the journey through the exhibition will kind of mirror this journey that I've alluded to, of you know, from the city to the sea. And there are 3 rooms, and the show will very much reflect that journey of the city paintings and the sea paintings. There will even be a little bit of installation, I think, in one of the rooms.
Exciting.
Yeah. Sort of mirroring one of my paintings is a sort of storm blowing chairs and whatnot through the air, and I think we'll pick up some of that in one of the galleries, I think, as well.
And this is your largest solo exhibition to date.
Yes, well, I mean, this is my first sort of my first proper solo show, so I'm, you know, super excited to be doing it with BWG Gallery.
And this is a really important solo show for you here at the gallery. What have you got planned for afterwards? What's on the horizon for you, James?
Well, the most exciting thing, I'm really excited to have a piece of work in the New Contemporaries this year, and that show opens at the Grundy Art Gallery in Blackpool at the end of September, and is going to be carrying on through December, and then we'll move to the Camden Arts Centre in January. So I'm really excited about it.
Congratulations, that's
Thank
great
you.
news.
I'm really excited about being in that show and sort of being part of that family, if you like, meeting the other artists, and we get some mentoring from the New Contemporary organisation, and so there's that, and really just starting to work on a new body of work. I think what's so exciting about doing a show is you can not put it behind you, but it's sort of, you can put down a full stop and then write a new sentence, and so that for me is what I'm looking forward to, and definitely more painting in Greece.
Sounds wonderful. I can't wait to see what you paint in Greece. James, it's been such a joy talking to you today. Thank you so much, and congratulations on the incredible exhibition.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you. Okay, so Tales of the City, Tales of the Sea is opening here at BWG Gallery on the 19th of October, and it runs to the 15th of November. So please come down and enjoy the show.